following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Alan Blumkin, and I'm here today with David Nemec. We're going to do another episode of David Nemec's Baseball History and Trivia. Today we're going to discuss the all-time team of the 1930s, which we all know was a fairly heavy hitting era, and where you didn't have that many very good pitchers during that time, and it was an era that was dominated, as I mentioned before, by hitting. Good afternoon, David.
Hi, great to be with you again, Al. I understand
same here.
Cold weather there.
Yeah, it's hitting like 22 degrees here, and it'll be, which compared to yesterday is hot. It'll be in the 30s tomorrow, the early 30s, low 30s, and then it's supposed to get up to the mid-50s by Tuesday for a couple of days. So
wow.
It's insane.
50s in February. That's
it's insane because the Midwest really got clobbered with this polar vortex that has crossed the nation in the last few days.
I know.
Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland and cities like that were just basically impossible to get through for the last couple of days, and they're warming up. And Chicago, I know, which was minus 29 the other day, is supposed to hit 41. I think either tomorrow or Sunday, so it's a swing of 70 degrees inside of a couple of day period. And you Californians are lucky you missed this. Although I see from the Weather Channel you're getting a lot of rain down there.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a lot of rain yesterday, and it's supposed to be again tomorrow. But
okay, so let's get started. David, I'll defer to you as I usually do on these old-time programs. So I guess with catcher, you have Dickey and Cochran in the American League, and you have Hartnett in the National League.
Yeah, you do. Catching was a little thin otherwise in the National League. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, the Ernie Lombardi.
You had workmen like guys like Al Todd.
Yeah.
And they were consistently pretty good ball players. And then you had Ernie Lombardi with the with the Reds, who developed into probably one of the best hitting catchers of all time. And even though he was hardly graceful, he was an adequate fielder, had a pretty good arm, and was a formidable presence when you're trying to score from third base if he was standing there. Although in the 39 World Series, he got decked pretty hard, knocked out. And
he wasn't exactly a speed demon either.
No, he wasn't. They used to play him back on the outfield grass, the middle infielders, because he hit these tremendous topspin, one hoppers.
Yeah.
And if you were playing in, your normal position, they'd almost knock you through the right field fence. So infielders did play him deep. I don't know that he ever bunted. I'm sure he must have at least tried. So third basemen had their hands full too. And he was, but it was a strong era for hitting catchers. Dickey, Cochran, Hartnett, and Lombardi were all solid 300-year hitters, season after season. And Hartnett had the most power of the four. And it's a difficult call to say who the best one was.
I know,
Cochran was a player manager.
Dickey and Cochran, it's usually very tough. And Cochran, of course, went from the A's to the Tigers in the climax fire sale after 1931. And Cochran led the Tigers to 2 World Series appearances and 1 World Series victory before he was beamed in 1937, and that basically ended his playing career.
It did end it right there on the spot.
Yeah.
He never played again. Yeah, that was a tragedy.
Yeah, from what I read that they gave him last rites on the field.
I think that's true. Yeah, it was really touch and go. And he came back as a manager, and he was an executive, front office guy, but he never really did much. He wasn't really a manager very long either.
Yeah, because I guess he had to become a bench manager, and he couldn't deal with that.
Yeah. But Dickey played with great teams all through his career. So it's difficult to get a true read on Dickey, how good he would have been if he'd been with, say, the White Sox or even Cleveland or Detroit in the 30s, which were his best seasons. Hartnett I'd probably take Hartnett if I had to as my catcher if I were going for the pennant. Hartnett's best seasons were pennant-winning seasons, often for the Cubs.
And, we had that big home run in 1938 against the Pirates. What they call the homer in the Gloaming.
Homer in the Gloaming, yeah. And pretty much
that essentially knocked the Pirates out of the race that year.
Yeah. But I think those are the four. Although you had guys like Billy Sullivan with Cleveland, who'd come up with a good year every now and then,
and Harry Danning.
you have a Hall of Famer whom we haven't even mentioned yet from the 30s.
Rick Farrell.
That's Rick Farrell. Yeah.
Oh my God! Well, he is. Not exactly a.
No, he isn't.
He's like one of the Harold Baineses of. I mean, there's a number that we'll get into that a little bit later that Frankie Frisch and Charlie Gehringer, who were on the Veterans Committee, put in there that they really have no business being there.
They put the wrong Farrell in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That like Dick Thompson did a book on the Farrell family, and he was assisting for the first several years of his career that Wes Farrell was better than Lefty Grove.
And he made a good case. He did. When we get to pitchers, we
yeah. And Harry Danning of the Giants was also fairly good.
He was good.
Yeah.
He was good.
And the Cardinals had, I think, when they won in 1934, a catcher named Bill Delancey who got what did he come down with?
I think it may have been TB.
Yeah.
He had a good season or two, and that was it.
Yeah.
And the weaker teams had weak catching.
Yeah, well, the Dodgers had Al Lopez, who was.
Well, Lopez, who certainly wouldn't have made the Hall of Fame as a catcher, but
no, he did at that
long career helped him, I think, make it.
Yeah, he did at that particular time have a record for most games caught.
Yeah,
which was broken a number of times since.
Yeah, so there was Shandy Hogan, who was a pretty good hitter for a catcher. A couple other guys like that, but I think we've hit the top four.
Okay, first base was overloaded, and especially in the American League. You had Gehrig until his illness, Jimmy Fox, Hank Greenberg, and Hal Trotsky in the American League, just off the top of my head.
And Trotsky never even came close to being the best first baseman in the American League, even though he hit he hit in the 340s, with 25, 30 home runs and big RBI seasons.
Well, he had migraine problems, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He came back and played a couple of years during the war, but his career was curtailed. Even if it had been a full-length career, it's doubtful they would have made the Hall of Fame because the competition was so keen, just in the American League alone at first base. And then the National League, you had Bill Terry, and the last National Leaguer to hit 400.
Yeah. Well, he did that in 1930, which was the ultimate hitters year.
Yeah, and you had Gus Sir, who had one time held the record, the most consecutive games played by a National Leaguer.
Yeah.
That, I think, ended when he went to his
mother's. I think he had to go to his mother's funeral or something like that.
Yeah, and around 1935. But
he
was a good but not great first baseman.
Yeah.
Charlie Grimm was a good first baseman. Most teams
Frank
had
McCormick, was he part of that era?
Frank McCormick with the Reds was MVP.
Yeah.
1940. The most
I think
teams
my started in the 30s for the Cardinals.
My started in the 30s, yeah. And I think in overall career, I might have taken Mize over Terry. Mize had power. He had.
He very rarely struck out.
Yeah, he really struck out, and a really solid player for a lot of. He got his career was shortened by the war. He was still in his prime when he went, but Mize. I say Terry in the first half of the 30s and Mize in the second half. And, second base is
Gehringer.
You have Charlie Gehringer and Joe Gordon later in the 30s came on.
Yeah, Lazzeri was there for the first part. Yeah.
And an underrated second baseman who really helped out was Max Bishop of the A's.
Yeah. Excellent
leadoff hitter. Not well remembered today because he didn't hit that much for average, but threw a lot of walks. They called him the camera high, and never went for a bad pitch supposedly. But and then the National League had
Frankie Frisch.
Had Frisch, and they weren't loaded at second base.
Billy Herman.
Billy Herman was solid.
Yeah, because in fact, Bill James in one of his books compared Buddy Meyer of Washington to favorably to Billy Herman, and Buddy Meyer. Nobody, hardly anybody remembers.
I know. Yeah, he did win a batting title, but beyond that, you're right. And Gehringer won a batting title too, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were the first second baseman to win a batting title since 1914. If you give Eddie Collins the batting title credit, which he, by today's standards, he would have earned.
Yeah, in the American League, we're talking.
Now he had come close to enough plate appearances.
Because you had Hornsby in the 20s winning every National League.
And Hornsby in the 20s.
Yeah.
But Collins in the American League was the first. But they were solid. At shortstop, we had Luke Ampling, who went on forever.
Supposedly in the 1930s and 40s, the only reason to go to Comiskey Park was to see Appling and Ted Lyons.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty mediocre most of the time. And
it was sad.
Yeah, they had Cronin.
Joe Cronin, who wasn't that good a fielder, but
no, Frankie Crissetti wasn't that good a hitter.
Wasn't a good hitter. You had Bill Knickerbocker, Lynn Larry, a lot of guys like that who were solid ball players, but nothing really special. And
because Cecil Travis came up during that era.
Yeah, Travis came up. He had solid years throughout.
Yeah, might have made the Hall of Fame if it wasn't for the war, and he came back with frozen feet. And from what I read, he was in playing ball, and then in the Army, and when the manpower got short, they put him in combat, and he got frozen feet in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
When he came back to Washington after the war, he just couldn't do it anymore.
No, he couldn't. couldn't try it a couple of years, and they were very, very mediocre years for him.
Yeah, and nationally you had Leo DeRocha, who was called the All-American out.
Yeah.
By Babe Ruth, and he was a
he
very weak.
He had Woody English had a couple
yeah.
of seasons, and but the best was Archie Vaughan.
Yeah.
And Vaughan would get my vote for the best shortstop in the 30s.
Yeah, Vaughan was, went to the Dodgers, and he, rebelled against DeRocha, and but Vaughan had a very high hitting career, and he tragically died in a boating accident at the age of 40.
Yeah.
In 1952.
Actually, I think he drowned.
Yeah.
He may have drowned trying to save somebody, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sad. Yeah, but Vaughan had the highest average in the 20th century, or since the 1890s of any shortstop, when he won the batting title in 35, I believe.
And there were two who always confused me. The Dick Bartell was one, and Billy Rogel, who was the shortstop for the Tigers.
Yeah. Bartell was a solid shortstop, and if Vaughan had been in the National League, I think Bartell would have been in a lot more All-Star games. He was a very underrated player. So the shortstop crop is deeper, actually, now that I look at it, than I thought.
Was Travis Jackson was still there? All right.
Yeah, Travis Jackson was there. Yeah. And it's interesting that we didn't mention him earlier, because he's a Hall of Famer, and yet hardly someone you think of associate with the Hall of Fame. But again,
you think his numbers justify it? Or?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's another basically Frisch.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody, when they were when they put Baines in, Hall of Fame put Harold Baines in, calculated that there were 11 players that really questionable that Frisch was responsible for getting into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, there were.
It's almost equally split between the Giants and the Cardinals.
Yeah, and one of them we mentioned it. We didn't mention at first base, even though he had some good years in it.
Jim Bottomley.
Jim Bottomley, exactly.
Yeah.
And but they weren't great years. He was never the best player on his team.
Yeah.
Never the best first baseman even in his league. Yet he did win a batting title, kind of a fluky way. And
he did drive in 12 runs in one game, which is still the record.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
Not to mention the Greenberg, because Greenberg, I think he came into the Tigers in 1933, and he was from the Bronx. In fact, he went to the same high school as my mother, even though he was a few years ahead of her. But he wasn't about to sign with the Yankees because Gehrig was blocking him, so he went to Detroit. And he had terrific years, but he missed almost the entire 1936 season because I think he played in 12 games. He broke his wrist.
Yeah.
And then in 1940, he wound up switching to the outfield because the Tigers had gotten Rudy York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Greenberg missed almost the entire, he came back late in the 45.
Because of the war, he missed almost 4 seasons.
He missed 4.5 at least prime seasons. And
you're right, 41. He missed 41 entirely, yeah.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And a while back I looked up Fox on Baseball Reference, and my God, did he have numbers. Jimmy Fox.
No.
Oh, yeah. Man, he was just, he was just an amazing hitter, both for the A's. He was the one of the A's that Mac held on to for the longest. Then he went to the Red Sox, where he really put up tremendous numbers. I mean, it was basically him, Greenberg, and Gehrig up until the time Gehrig fell off a lot at the last month or two in 1938 when I think the effects of the ALS had started toward the end of the season in 1938.
Yeah.
And third base.
Third base, you had.
Was it Pie Traynor?
Pie Traynor was voted the all-time, I think in 1950 or 51, was voted the all-time.
Well, he was considered until Eddie Matthews, and Matthews considered until you wound up with basically Schmidt, Brett, and Boggs in the 80s, 70s and 80s.
No, I don't think it was justified. I think he was a good ball player.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was a great ball player. He was in an era where the competition at third base was, people like Ozzie Bluege and
and the Pirates had Fred Lindstrom, who is another one of the fresh appointees that has no business being there.
No.
And Pepper Martin was there.
Yeah.
Now, I think the Yankees were using, for the last part of that decade anyway, using Red Rolfe, who was, you're right, there weren't very many. The pickings were pretty slim at that position.
Yeah, and they had Sam
and Harlan Clift.
Bad News Hale with Cleveland.
Harlan Clift.
Harlan Clift was, I think, the best fielding third base.
Yeah, he's one of the few Browns you can even consider in these kinds of conversations.
I know. No. Yeah, that we've pretty much covered the cream of the crop at third base.
Yeah, well, he did have a few seasons where he drove in 100 and he didn't hit 10 home runs. And he had 320 overall, but you're right, he was the best of very slim pickings.
Yeah. And
okay, when you got to the outfield, it's a bit different.
Yeah, the outfield is different, and it's colored in part by the fact that in the first half of the 30s, it's pretty hard to exclude Root, even though he fell off the table pretty quickly.
Yeah.
34, his 30, 31, 32, 33 seasons. There's 31 season in particular were pretty extraordinary. So he was hardly just a guy playing out the string. But then because of his inability to stay in condition, the Yankees let him go after 34 and 35. He pretty much was finished except for that 1-3 home run game at Ford Field.
Yeah, I think one of the better ones throughout the 30s was Al Simmons.
Al Simmons was good, but again, by the end of the 30s, Simmons was pretty much finished. And Chuck Klein. My feelings about Chuck Klein. I know.
He's a strict Baker Bowl hitter. And he had tremendous numbers his first stint, and then they sent him to the Cubs after 1933 when he won the Triple Crown, and his numbers fell off precipitously. And then they started to rise when he went back to the Phillies in Baker Bowl in 1936. After
they never got back to their old, and the reason they didn't get back was Klein was never the same player.
Yeah, well, no. If you look at his splits
really badly in 34.
Yeah, if you look at his splits when he got back to Baker Bowl in 1936, they were tremendous again until the Phillies moved out of Baker Bowl into Shibe Park in June 1938.
Yeah.
His splits are just too unbelievable. It's like he plays the peak of his career in Coors.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't think he's legitimate. I don't think he's a legitimate Hall of Famer.
Yeah. There's an awful lot to consider, though. That's the thing. He won the Triple Crown, and just pretty much.
All you have to do is go into reference and look at his OPS was over 1 in Baker Bowl, really over 1. And you just look at his splits. You go into reference, and they have all this stuff, and it's just incredible.
Yeah.
Well, you had in the National League, you had Mel Ott.
Mel Ott played some third base.
Yeah, and Mellot also. Mellot
was the Polo Grounds.
Yeah, well, there's a biography that came out on him a number of years ago, a McFarlane book. I think it was by a guy named Fred Stein, and but they had his numbers in the back as home road splits, and outside of the home runs, it wasn't that bad. His splits weren't that bad. And another one from the 30s was Ducky Medwick.
Yeah.
From the Cardinals.
Medwick was good until he was beaned.
Yeah, that was later. That was in 1940 after, he came to the Dodgers, and then I think with that incident was Larry McPhail, who was running the Dodgers at the time, actually went onto the field. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was earlier. I think it was 38 or 9 when Bob Bowman beaned him.
Yeah. That's with the Dodgers when that happened.
Yeah.
It's Bob Bowman who beaned him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of others, Wally Berger.
Wally
was
Berger.
Very, very underrated because he played with the Braves, who were horrible most
Terrible.
of the time.
Yeah.
And on the and Babe Herman, who could hit like heck but couldn't field at all, and lefty O'Doul. Yeah, you had
O'Doul had a couple of good years in the 30s.
Yeah. And that's strictly from the National League. And you had, I don't know if you'd consider Rick Stevenson part of this era because
Rick Stevenson's an interesting case. He's a right-handed hitter, and he has the highest career batting average of, with the exception of Pete Browning, of players who are eligible for the Hall of Fame who aren't in it. He had 10 seasons. He had all the appropriate credentials.
Yeah.
But I would never consider him a great player or even a great hitter. He didn't hit for a lot of power. He was a good average hitter, and he had a bad arm. Usually was replaced for defensive purposes in the late innings. I don't think he ever led the league in anything significant. But he sneaks through.
Yeah, another one I'm not really sold on is Hack Wilson, because he only had a couple of years.
Yeah. Again, he didn't take care of himself, and
it was sort of like the advocates for Roger Maris, who had a couple of big years, including the 61 home run year. And there are people out there who think he's a Hall of Famer. And I got into a big debate a while back with Peter Golenbach on this, and I just don't think he had the numbers. And Wilson's overall numbers were similar. Yeah.
Well, Maris, I think Maris was a much better ball player than people give credit for. I think he was a better ball player, much better ball player than Hack Wilson. And he had some injuries. Playing with the Yankees was always tough for him. And we went him over to the National League with the Cardinals. He had a couple of pretty good years left in him. And I think he's kind of a sad case, really, because I think he never was rated as highly as he should have been. But he went through in 1961. He wasn't protected at all by the media, and it took an awful lot out of him. It really did. He really couldn't handle it. Wasn't by personality equipped to handle all that very well, and it just took a huge toll on him. And I mean, it's almost as much of a toll as being a pioneer took out on Jackie Robinson. They both died very, very young. Yeah.
In the American League, you had the Yankees. You had Joe DiMaggio coming up in 1936, who was a star instantly.
DiMaggio definitely in the late 30s. Oh yeah, you could put an outfield there of Ruth early 30s, DiMaggio late 30s.
And Ted Williams came up in 1939.
And Williams came up late.
And you had
considered.
Earl Averill.
Earl Averill would definitely be on the team. Averill was consistently good throughout the 30s. Simmons was good until the end of the 30s.
Yeah, Goose Goslin.
Goslin, I think, was better than Simmons. If he had been playing for the A's and Simmons had been playing for Washington, you would have seen very different numbers for each of them.
Goose, from 1921 to 1939, he played in every World Series in the American League that didn't involve the Yankees or the A's.
Yeah,
he won three times with Washington and twice with the Tigers.
That wasn't just a coincidence.
No.
He was a really fine ball player. And trailing behind him, and similar in some respects, is Heine Manush.
Yeah, they were traded for each other at one point.
They were. It was considered a bad trade at the time, and it still is. Goslin was vastly superior to Manush. And but there were, most teams had. Joe Bosmick had some good years with Cleveland.
Yeah, with the Indians. Yeah.
Very, very good years. But he tailed off very sharply after he had a pretty good year. And he had a good year. Almost won the batting title the year that Buddy Meyer won it. Should have probably won it. And then he started tailing off pretty sharply. But in the early 30s, he was a devastating hitter. Very good. And,
have we overlooked anybody?
I'm sure we have.
Paul Wainer.
Paul Wainer would definitely have to be on the team.
Yeah.
Wainer was a good, really solid ball player for a long time.
Much better than his brother.
Much better than his brother.
Yeah.
And overall, if I were to have to take a team in the National League for the entire 1930s, form an all-star team, I would pick Wainer in the outfield over anybody else. I would take him ahead of Ott, but certainly ahead of Klein, because Klein didn't have that many good years. But
no.
Yeah, Wainer was really, really good. And there were guys like Ivo Goodman with the Reds.
Yeah.
Didn't hit for high averages, but pretty solid power numbers, good fielders. They were instrumental in pennant-winning teams. Almost every team had it.
The Yankees had
like
Heinrich and Keller in the last few years, but Heinrich especially was a very good clutch ball player, but a Hall of Famer, not in my book.
No, but Keller might have been if he hadn't had it.
He had back problems. Yeah, that derailed him.
I think Keller might well have been made the Hall of Fame. And the Yankees had Twinkle Toe Selkirk for, he had some pretty good years with them.
He's most famous for, replacing Ruth in right field.
Yeah.
And
there were a lot of ball players like they'd hit 300. They wouldn't do much else. Guys like Pete Fox and
everybody's hitting 300.
Year.
I remember the Yankees in 1936 led the American League on an average with 445.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure if I looked up, a number of those years around that time, you'd see things like that. I mentioned before Wally Berger, who actually made a few All-Star teams in those early All-Star games.
Well, the equivalent in the American League to Berger, and I think he was even better than Berger, was Bob Johnson.
No, Indian Bob Johnson, You're right. I have a book on him that came out a number of years ago, and he was stuck on those horrible A's teams from that
horrible A's team. Yeah, finished his career in 45. And he has the numbers. I'm surprised. I think it was only because he was on the A's and in the American League that he wasn't part of the Frisch gang that went into the Hall of Fame in the 1930s. Because he had much better numbers than the guys that Frisch helped pick. Johnson to me is the guy who got cheated the most in the 1930s, certainly among the hitters. I think he's a genuine Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Today.
I don't know why Mac kept him around.
But Johnson didn't protest, I guess.
Yeah.
And he's content.
They probably lowballed him every year with the contract, and
he probably got paid the most.
In those days, yeah, because
they change compared to what he would have gotten with the.
Yeah, they chopped everybody during the Depression.
Yeah.
And I think after DiMaggio's rookie year, he wanted some what the Yankees considered outrageous, either after 1937, 1938, and Barrow told DiMaggio what Gehrig was getting paid, and DiMaggio said to Barrow, says Gehrig is vastly underpaid. DiMaggio had a big holdout in 1938, which he was criticized for because it was still during the Depression.
Yeah. No, I think we were missing a couple other outfielders. Let me think. Well, there were a couple who had really big years. Bo Bell had two really big years. Yeah, he had 2 years. 2 years.
2 years on the Browns, I think it was. Yeah, and that was it. He fell off the table very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and a couple others. I'm trying to think.
The third outfielder for Detroit was JoJo Moore.
JoJo Moore with the Giants.
JoJo and JoJo White was with the Tigers.
JoJo White was with the Tigers for a while. Yeah. And the guy who came up toward the end of the 30s, who I thought was going to develop into a sensational player based on his first 2 years, was Barney McCoskey.
Yeah.
And he had a great rookie year, then he had sensational sophomore year.
He had severe back problems.
He was never the same player after that for some reason. He
had severe back problems. In fact, the Tigers traded him in 1943 to the A's for George Kell. Yeah. And then he had a couple of really sensational years. He had a very good year for the 1948 A's, who finished in fourth place, and he missed the whole 1949 season because of the back problems, and that basically was it.
Yeah, he hit 328, I think, in 48, but with no home runs. And
because I first heard of him when I got either his 51 Bowman card or his 52 Topps card. That's how I knew about him. But he was, basically done by then.
Yeah, I met him a couple of times, talked to him. He admitted that after the 48 season, he was pressured to develop into more of a power hitter instead of a spray hitter. And he had a rowing machine in his basement, and he overtaxed himself that winter. When he first reported spring training, he didn't realize how bad his back was until he took the field for the first day. And after that, the 49 season was completely washed out.
No, they collapsed. The A's collapsed in 1949. They wound up, in the last place. They set a record for double plays, but then again, they had 5 pitchers that walked over 100 batters. So, so the opportunity for a lot of double plays was there.
It was there. And they had a good fielding team. So.
Yeah, because I found that out about the double plays in the first Turk and Thompson, and then when I did a study in the 80s of strikeout to walk ratios, and I found that when I got to 1949, I found they had 5 pitchers that walked over 100, and then I realized why they set the record for double plays that season.
Well, there was something going on in the American League in 49.
That year, the Tigers, I think, were the only staff in the American League that had more strikeouts than walks, and the number was something like 3.
Yeah.
And another one we forgot to didn't mention that started his career in the 30s, but was much more prominent than the 40s, was Bobby Doerr.
Yeah,
I think he came up a year ahead of Ted Williams.
Yeah.
And there's another one who I think we didn't mention, and when the Philadelphia Athletic Society was in existence, they phased out a few years ago. The head of that, the man named Ted Taylor, was pushing very hard for Doc Kramer to be a Hall of Famer. I looked at his numbers, and he's not a Hall of Famer in my book because he had absolutely no power.
300 hitter.
Yeah, absolutely no power.
No power.
300 and everybody
averages
300.
His averages were above 300, but nothing sensational. Didn't score a lot of runs, didn't steal a lot of bases.
Yeah.
But he played a long, long time. He was still active in his 40s, which was rare in those days.
Yeah, another one they had in that era who, I saw got early cards of because he was a hitting coach was Wally Moses.
Yeah, Moses was another guy that lasted long.
Yeah.
Moses was a better ball player than
Kramer. Yeah.
Yeah. We should get to the pitching.
Okay. Yeah.
Pitching is really interesting.
Yeah. Pitching, and it's commonplace to say that the best pitcher in the American League was Grove, and the best pitcher in the National League was Hubble.
Yeah, I think in Hubble's case it's probably true. In the American League, Mac, there were just too many games, against contending teams. He let Grove pitch against the Yankees very, very seldom.
The thing is, there were a lot of, outside of the A's,
in the World Series.
There were a lot of very bad teams in the league. The Red Sox were pretty bad most of the time. The Browns were pretty putrid.
Yeah. So if you look
White
at
Sox
29-31 World Series, Grove was almost he pitched very seldom. Mac relied on Wahlberg and Earnshaw in the series. I think Grove was a good pitcher. I don't think Grove was nearly as great a pitcher as he's been made out to be.
Yeah, well, he had at 30-31, his ERA was like two runs under the league average. He was 28-5 and 31-4 those two seasons.
And he had a good team behind him.
Yeah, and he also lost a bunch of years, in the International League in the 20s before they brought him up, and he wasn't even used a lot before the late 20s.
Yeah, I know. He led the American League in strikeouts as a rookie. I think he had 107.
Yeah, he led the league in the ERA, American League in the ERA 7 times. 9 times, yeah. And
he was, but it's questionable whether he was even better than Lefty Gomez.
Gomez
was also another guy who played on great teams.
Yeah, but Gomez was extremely up and down. He had 26-5 in 1934, and he was not that consistent. But I'll tell you who was extremely underrated in the 30s in the American League was Red Ruffing. Red Ruffing had a 620 percentage when he was with the Yankees. He came over from Boston with a 36-92 record. Yeah. And he wound up 50 games, coming over with that, and he wound up his career 50 games over 500.
Yeah.
The only pitcher that had a better won-loss record than him over a similar length with the Yankees, better won-loss percentage was Whitey Ford.
Yeah. No, Ruffing, I agree with you. Ruffing was, definitely one of the top pitchers in the 30s. And the National League had guys, a lot of guys with mediocre teams.
You had Derringer and Walters. You had
Derringer with terrible teams. After his rookie year, the Cardinals, he went to the Reds and had terrible, terrible teams. He was a 27-game loser one year, but Derringer was for 15 years, from day one of his rookie year to the final day of his major league career. He pitched 15 seasons, and every one of his 15 seasons, he pitched enough innings to be a qualifier for the ERA. Every one. Nobody else can make that claim in major league history. So Derringer was a very, very steady, underrated pitcher. And when he teamed with Bucky Walters in the late 30s, the Reds pitching staff really carried them pretty far. Had a lot to do with them. Of course, Lombardi catching them. Their battery was what won the pennant for them mostly in 39, before.
Yeah, well, you had the Dizzy Dean before he wrecked his arm from the All-Star game in 1937 when he had the broken toe. You had guys on, Bill Lee.
Bill Lee with the Cubs, 38 was good. And Ed Brand, who pitched
to the Braves,
terrible Braves teams,
was
also, I think, a very good pitcher. And there was Hugh losing pitcher Mulcahy, who pitches, his career with the Phillies.
Ben Cantwell of the Braves. Frank House wasn't too bad with them.
No.
And you had the Dodgers. You had Desi Vance for a good part of that time. You had, I think the Giants had Fred Fitzsimmons before he went to the Dodgers.
Fitzsimmons, and Hal Schumacher.
Schumacher. And the Dodgers had Luke Hamlin, and of course Van Lingle Mungo.
Luke Hamlin was a 20-game winner once.
Van Lingle Mungo.
Van Lingle Mungo, I think, was their best overall pitcher in the 30s. I think Vance started out the 30s, but by the end of the 30s, I think Mungo was their best.
And Mungo is famous for the song.
Yeah, right. It's a great song. But
the Indians had Mel Harder, who was very good.
Yeah, and they had Farrell, and
as
we mentioned before, I mean, Dick made a very strong case for Farrell belonging in the Hall of Fame and being perhaps the best pitcher in the American League when he was in his prime.
And later in the decade,
Later
in the decade, that had rookie out of Iowa.
Yeah.
And he was much better before. Another one was much better before the war than he was afterward.
Yeah. Well, he got hurt in 46.
Yeah.
He had a big year in 46.
Yeah.
And he and Newhouser both had big seasons. In 47, in the night game against the A's, he hurt his arm, and just a tug on his shoulder, I think, just felt something, a twinge, and pitched on, and he was never the same.
His last big year was 1951.
He had good seasons. He got by. He got by in guile, and he developed other pitches, but he didn't have his fastball. If he'd had that fastball throughout the 40s into the 50s, I think.
And he had White Sox, as I mentioned before. They had Ted Lyons, who
every Sunday.
It's 260 and 230 with them, and he I think 1 year started 20 games because he could only pitch on the weekends because he couldn't work that often, and I think he completed all 20 games. And he also had very few strikeouts. He set all sorts of record for pitchers with that kind of decisions with low strikeouts. And later he became a mentor to pitchers, and he was the one who was the mentor to Eddie Lopat when Lopat started his career with the White Sox. Yeah. And Lopat in turn became a mentor to Whitey Ford.
Yeah, you're right. Lopez developed some interesting pitchers with the White Sox. Or I'm sorry, not Lopez, but
Jimmy Dykes was the manager, I think, for most of that time there. With those teams. But they were pretty, as I mentioned before, they were pretty. I mean, it took them about 40 years to recover from the Black Sox scandal.
It did. It's true. Yeah.
And relief pitchers were being used. Relief pitchers started to be used for the first time during that decade with Johnny Murphy and Fred Marbury.
And then there was the Jumbo Brown.
Yeah.
Relief pitcher. They did use a lot more relief pitching in the 30s.
Yeah, and we can't let this go without mentioning Les Weekland, who in 1930 for the Phillies, who had a team ERA of 671, had an ERA, had 154 innings, and had an ERA of 771, which is still the record. For that,
there were other guys on that team who were pretty close.
Yeah, Willoughby, and they They had
Ray Culp, and they had a terrible pitching staff.
And Sweetland pitched an opening day shutout, which makes the 771. They were 52-12, 102. They hit 315 as a team and won 52 games.
Yeah.
And the Phillies and the A's toward the end of that decade, the Phillies had terrible teams from 1938 to 1942, and they lost over the 5-year period. They lost something like they lost over 500 games in the 5-year period. They had 50 wins, I think, won once out of 5 years, and the A's were almost as bad.
Yeah.
So let's go to managers. I mean, I know everybody loves Joe McCarthy, but I'm not a big fan of his because I feel he was very good at winning, lopsided races. But when it came to close races, he had 5 times where the margin was 3 games or less, and he lost all of them.
Yeah, I don't remember were the Yankees even in a close race.
He lost 3 games. He lost 1935, and then in the 1940. He lost because he insisted on playing Crissetti at shortstop the whole year, and Crissetti hit 194. And they had Rizzuto in the AAA hitting over 300, and they refused to make that change, and they wound up losing. The race was basic race between the Tigers and the Indians, but the Yankees were like 3 games out. He lost with the Cubs in 1930, and of course there's the 2 infamous losses with the Red Sox in 48 and 49.
Yeah.
And so you had basically.
I wouldn't get my vote either.
Yeah, you had Mickey Cochran with the 2 pennants and Mack with the 3 pennants starting in 1929, and that was essentially it. And you had Washington in 33, and the nationally you had Frisch.
Player manager.
Yeah, Terry was a player manager and won 3 pennants.
Terry was a player manager who won. And Hartnett.
They had Grimm win 2 of them. Grimm wound up with 3 pennant winners, 32, 45, 35, and 45, which nobody seems to know about.
Yeah.
Because they lost all 3 of the World Series. And Bill McKechnie managed the Reds to those 2 pennants.
I think the best manager, as it turned out, we never would have known it at the time. But it was, I think, from the 30s, Bill McKechnie.
Yeah.
He had one in the 20s.
Yeah.
But then he ended up with the Braves.
Yeah.
And then he ended up with the Reds, who weren't much better. But he pulled the Reds together, and then got 2 pennants out of them.
Well, it's funny, the Braves were pretty
tough. Cleveland winning the pennant in 48 too. So McKechnie, he won the pennant with the Pirates, won the pennant with the Cardinals.
Yeah. What the thing is, if you look at the Boston Braves, they had 3 Hall of Fame managers, when they were pretty bad most of the time, who were there for 5 years. You had McKechnie, Stengel, and Billy Southworth. Southworth won one pennant with them in 1948. But it was amazing that these guys spent as much time with that franchise as they did.
Yeah, well, Stengel was just breaking in, and I don't know what happened to McKechnie, why he didn't hook on with a better team after, why I'm not even sure why the Cardinals let him go and why somebody like Cleveland didn't pick him up in the 30s. I think he could have won several pennants in the 30s with the right teams. Yeah,
well, 30 seemed to be like a decade where you had teams that were dominant or near dominant that basically monopolized the decade and in both leagues, and then you had teams that were literally on the bottom for most of that time. And the National League had the Braves and the Phillies, and the American League had the Browns and the A's. After Mack unloaded the team from the early 30s.
And once Washington won the pennant in 33,
the White Sox were pretty bad most of the time. Yeah,
they were bad. Yeah, it was really a 4-team league for most of the 30s.
Yeah, the Dodgers basically was 6th place, so they didn't win anything until MacPhail came and they wanted to give pennant in 1941. So the Dodgers were and the Boston Braves and the Phillies were usually at the bottom of the National League.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we did a pretty good job on this.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to thank you. As usual, your insights are
thank you.
Very, very welcome.
For these.
And I'm getting to the point where I'm more comfortable with players from these times than I was from 19th century dead ball era. So I want to thank you. It was always a pleasure, and we'll do the next one soon.
Good.
Okay. Say hi to Marilyn. Okay, and I'll notify Ralph, and we'll pick it up another time. Thank you, David.
Good. Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Al.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.